Welcome to Finding Contentment, the official podcast of the American Institute of Stress. The goal of this podcast is to explore the science, psychology, and practical wisdom that can help us manage our stress. If you are looking for personal growth and professional success, or just want a more fulfilling life, visit us at stress.org. And now here is the host and executive director of the American Institute of Stress, Will Heckman.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the American Institute of Stress's official podcast, Finding Contentment. And while I got you here, I want to remind you to go to stress.org and to subscribe to our magazines. They're free. And look at all the other stuff we have to offer. And speaking of subscribing, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. It lets us know that, first of all, you're watching. And second of all, it helps us grow our channel. We appreciate it. And today we have a great subject, one we've talked about before, but it's never going to go away. And that's about workplace stress. You know, have you ever had one of those days where at work when you feel like you're juggling flaming swords and while riding a unicycle on a tightrope? Yeah, we've all had those days. Yeah. And today our podcast is about workplace stress, and we'll be delving into the daily grind of how it can sometimes make you feel like you're drowning in a sea of deadlines and emails and office politics, our favorite. But fear not, we're here to share some stories and tips and maybe a dash of humor to help keep everyone's sanity intact in the corporate jungle. So grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is you're drinking, find a comfy spot. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the downright crazy aspects of workplace stress. And we're lucky enough to have a very special guest today, Mr. Ken Spencer. Ken formed HR Services back in 2004 and providing HR solutions for thousands of employees all across the country. And Ken has also taught compliance and leadership and HR courses for Westminster College and the University of Phoenix. He's got over 25 years of compliance and HR experience. He's also earned his master's degree in human resources management from the University of Utah and holds a bachelor's degree in marketing as well. So I want you to join me in welcoming our very special guest, Mr. Ken Spencer. Ken, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good morning, Will. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
You know, I have to tell you that no matter how much we talk about workplace stress, it is not enough. As adults, we spend a good part of our life at work. Some of us more than others. I've had jobs where 12, 16-hour days were not unusual. And if you think about that, wow, it's where you live. You come home to rest from the place you live.
Well,
and these days,
we really spend more awake hours at work than we do with our own family.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened. And I've heard, statistics of in other countries where they don't do that. But here in the United States, where I know we have international listeners and viewers here in the United States, that's pretty normal, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just the way it is. And I wanted to ask you, I know it's different for everyone because we talk about how stress is different for everyone all the time, but I wanted you, because you have a very global view of the workforce and the workplace, what would you say is the primary cause of workplace stress?
Will, it's hard to just say one thing because there are so many things that are causing it. One of them you alluded to, the long hours that people have to put in, and those long hours are sometimes not just at the office, they're at home after. And now we also have a lot of people that have gone to working remote, so there's
Right.
the stress of when to turn on and off work time. We've got a lot of heavy workloads that you had alluded to. Job insecurity. How many companies have been doing layoffs here over the last several months, and that gets people worried. A lot of conflicts going on still between team members and supervisors and such. But I think it even extends up to things like unrealistic expectations,
Mm-hmm.
unclear expectations, and then maybe not enough clear enough communication, or not frequently enough and such throughout the company with the supervisor and the employee. They're just, again, I say there's just so many variables there.
I've experienced every single one of those things. I can tell you they are frustrating. I've people who listen and watch this podcast know I was in education, and sometimes, wow, you just don't hear about what it is you're supposed to do, and God knows it changes daily, and the communication aspect of it is so unbelievable. And I know teachers who literally, I know people will be surprised to hear this, work 70, 80 hours a week, because when you're done, you come home, you sit down, and you go to work. It's incredible the amount of, and I guess it changes from field to field. I've been in other fields where it's not like that. But you made a really good point about some people are working at home, and that's changed a lot, and that's become more prevalent. I don't know, and I hear both sides. I like, that's a great thing. I get to work from home. And oh my God, this sucks. I never leave work. I don't know which is worse. One of the things I did want to ask you, because being an HR guy, you must hear about it, is about the impact that workplace stress has on individuals, both physically and their mental health. I know in the short term, it can have different effects than it does long term. What have you seen?
Some of the effects that we see actually are right in the job and the output themselves. The stress, a lot of times they get so distracted, they're not as productive, their attendance goes down, their tardiness goes up, they're more irritable, they're just not as communicative and open with others. But then we do see some things like increased anxiety, depression, um, some even substance abuse situations, sleeping problems, um, headaches, anxiety, all of these kinds of things that that run into.
Right. And all of those things we hear too. The unchecked, unmanaged stress of workplace stress becomes a diagnosable problem, like anxiety and depression, GAD, general anxiety disorders and things like that. And you're right. It affects production. I mean, we need stress. We need stress. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's without stress, we can't be productive. It can make us more productive. But the unmanaged chronic stuff, yeah, I as a teacher, I have seen teachers carried out on a gurney out of schools, and that makes you take, whoa, was there something wrong with them? Or I told people, people are not going to like me to say this, but the number one reason for burnout is dedication. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Sooner or later, you got to have a stopping point, or you got to stop. And different companies of different sizes probably do different things. Can you tell us some strategies or maybe some interventions that the employers or administrations or the people involved, they can implement, or first of all, to identify that somebody's going through something, or just to address it at all?
Yeah, well, for sure, you've got to start by understanding what's going on in your environment. So I would say, and it really starts at the grassroots of the supervisor being the eyes and ears and having the relationship with their teams, so they kind of understand the stresses and the situations in their personal lives and work lives. And they have to kind of understand a little bit of both, because a lot of times the stress is coming from a personal life, but then they bring it into the
Right.
workforce and vice versa. So it can happen both ways. But certainly having a relationship with your team that they can come to you and be open and honest and candid about feedback. So if we don't as leaders allow mistakes, and we don't as leaders allow people to slip up once in a while with and be candid with their feelings, um, we hinder ourselves of understanding stress and what's going on in the workplace. And certainly a lot of employers will do things like opinion surveys. They can do group discussions where they can get together and talk about it. And a lot too will put in place things like key performance indicators where they're monitoring, are they achieving the purpose of their job through these KPIs? And then if they see them dip up or down, a lot of times that's an indication that there's something going on. Um, and Will, I don't know if you wanted to. I mean, there's a lot of things that they do. That's kind of things to be aware of stress.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole list of things that employers are doing to try to minimize and manage stress within there. I don't know if you wanted me to go into any of that. But.
Well, the first thing is you're right, Ken. I mean, it has to do with your immediate supervisor. The problem that I've seen is that not all people are the same. Some people have, uh, uh you know, real skill in forming relationships with the people on their team and things like that. And some aren't. It depends on the industry that they're in, how often they even see their supervisor. We were talking a little bit about education before. I mean, that's like a microcosm of a workplace, because it's the teacher and the students. You don't have a supervisor there all the time. You get to go to a meeting, and I don't think I've ever been to one where people didn't bitch and moan about their job. But so I don't know how we get past that. People are human. You might be the greatest supervisor and really have a feel for that person's performance is not up to par, what's going on, while the other person is the other supervisor in their own world. Is there any way to fix that or bypass that?
A lot of that even starts with getting the right person in the right position. It's because a lot of times uh, certain jobs have a lot more stress or require a lot of
Mm,
other demands. I have a brother who works construction that requires a lot of people to be outside in the elements. And if somebody's not prone to that, or they don't like that, or there's a lot of physical elements to that, if they don't have that ability or like that kind of work, it's going to stress them out.
right.
So a lot of times it's getting the right person in the right place. Even supervisors, sometimes we quickly promote our top performers thinking that, oh, they'll be the best supervisor, and then we don't train them how to be a supervisor, and so we create the stress for them in this new role. We kind of set them up to fail almost. And so
Right.
but you're right that there's so many different personalities, and sometimes as employers we have to adjust to and be a little flexible to those personalities and customize the needs, the training, the help, the support that they need by individual.
You talk to companies and tell them there should be a component that for your training for your supervisors that have to deal with relationship building.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's having working together with, how do you get team members to work together? How do you resolve conflicts when they happen? How do you give somebody feedback about their performance and not demotivate them?
Right.
So there's a lot of skills and special training that's needed for supervisors. If we don't give them that when they go into those roles, we're setting them up to fail, or they'll be a very difficult boss that's creating stress for their team members because they're not effectively doing those things.
Well, glad to hear that that people in the upper echelons of businesses and corporations are at least aware of it. There was a time not that long ago where, yeah, hey, just do your job. Don't just just come in and show up on time and do your job. They couldn't care less. And I
Yeah.
think that's changed a little bit. I think people have seen that the importance of mental health. And I gotta say, I think it happened because they started seeing the bottom line. We lose $3 billion a year because of stress in the workplace. Employee productivity, absenteeism. You mentioned it yourself. Now there's something, quiet quitting. So I don't know. I certainly don't know the answers to fixing all this stuff. I know that there was training for teachers in education. Forming relationships is very important. Obviously, we're not making a car; we're dealing with a person, and some of them are young and insane. But I'm just kidding. They're not insane. They just seem it. I had a teenage daughter too. But at least we got some training in it. Your brother who works in construction, I mean, some guys get to be foreman because they've been there the longest.
Right.
I don't know if it's necessarily because they can get the most out of their team. So, but at least I think now that companies are seeing there's a reason to have a mental health component in your overall scheme in your HR department. What about the employees themselves? They have to find a way that they're able to communicate their stress-related concerns to their supervisor or the HR department without having to worry about repercussions. And when I say repercussions, I don't mean you're going to get fired or something like that. But you and I both know that if somebody comes to HR and says, "Oh, this is bothering me, this is bothering me," sometimes they can get pegged as the complainer. And that's not a fast track to promotion. So how do we allow employees to either do it? You talked about doing it as a group, which I think is a great idea. Well, what about personally?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult for some team members to come forward because, as you alluded, it could be viewed as a weakness that, oh, you're feeling stressed. Wow, I don't want to put you in that new promotion job
Right.
because you'll be so stressed then you can't handle this here now, and so you get viewed like you can't handle it or that you're not enough, and so there's that reluctance for people to come forward. I think to help break some of those barriers, employers just need to be open and honest with their team members that, hey, this happens to everybody. Let's all
Mm,
be a little bit vulnerable and maybe even share some of our own stresses and such that's going on in our life or our workplace, and let people know. Also making it safe, so if I have a relationship with my team members, or I'm encouraging that throughout the company, then people can come to me and they'll come to me, and I've got to have bank with people to where they know I've got their back, that I'm not going to look down on them. And that means I've got to be talking to them regularly. I've got to be having dialogue and asking, hey, how did your kid's ball game go? And tell me about
right.
that weekend that you just had. And that takes a couple of minutes. So we've got to invest some time in building relationships so people can be come to us and be open with us as well when they're having challenges, and make it okay. It's okay to let them have some challenges, and if they're not comfortable going to their supervisor, then have avenues for them to do that with others in the company, like you mentioned, human resources or some other means. A lot of companies even have an employee assistance program in place, that's there for people so they can go anonymous, don't even have to go through the company, and that's another great tool and resource as well.
EAPs work real well for a lot of things because, like you say, it could be anonymous. And some people are just uncomfortable talking to somebody they know at work. It could be a serious problem, and it can be embarrassing to them. Some people are more stoic than others, and it also depends on the profession. I know, and I have many friends who are police officers and first responders. They're not going to say anything. They're not going to say anything. And I talk to a lot of veterans, and they feel the same way. They're not going to say anything because first of all, they feel they're letting the brothers and sisters who work side by side with them in a very dangerous situation have doubt about them. They're worried
it's
about
viewed
that.
viewed as a weakness, like
Right.
you're not tough enough to be in that job because you have stress or anxiety or something.
And you made such a great point that, if you're coming to me about how stressed out you are, do I want to promote you? That's really a good point, and add to your stress. Let me ask you this, and this is only because someone mentioned this to me about a police department that's doing this, and I don't remember where it is, but they said that the officers were not going to voluntarily go and say, "Hey, I'm really stressed out. I'm starting to feel burnt out. I'm starting to feel the pressure. God knows I have a lot." He said, in order to overcome that, the stigma of them going to somebody and saying that, they made it mandatory for everyone. Everyone, every 6 months, had to have like a 15-minute sit down with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. There is no stigma. You have to do it as part of your job. No one else knows what else is going on. I thought that was a great solution to at least that part of the problem. I don't know if corporations can do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wonder how many of them come in and just kind of put on a front and say, okay, I'm just going to tell them what I think they want to hear so I can get this 15-minute thing done that's required. Because when we're forced to do things, often we don't come with our heart and our
Mm.
vulnerability, and it could develop that over time, perhaps. But yeah, interesting. I don't. Whenever I've seen situations where employers are trying to force something that's maybe isn't wanted by employees, my experience is they tend to put up a front and
Yeah,
some resistance and say, okay, let's just give them what they think they want to hear. Oh, things are just hunky dory in my life, and just I love it here, and then
right.
they walk out and say,
It,
but
there are some that are mandatory, because of a situation that they've been through. But I thought that was an interest, and you're right. I don't think that would happen the first meeting. I mean, what you said would happen, I think would happen the first meeting. I don't think the real connection would happen. It may take, so what? It takes a couple of years. If you started as day one, by the year 3 that you're at this company, as long as it's the same person who's the same psychologist or same, it could be a life coach. It can be somebody, somebody
yeah.
that you feel comfortable speaking
When
to.
people start to see the benefit and feel like it's like, hey, this is helping, then they will come more into it, I'm sure.
Right. And I think as awareness grows and that stigma goes away, I think it'll happen more often. you know Tell me some things that are typical signs or symptoms that you see or people have told you that employees that it should watch out for and recognize when workplace stress is becoming a problem for them. People go in and day out. I have seen it, just stressed out, and do the worst thing you can do for stress: nothing. They
Yeah.
just learn to live with it. That's a bad thing. 75% of doctor visits, 75% can be directly related to stress, unmanaged. So what are some of the signs people need to look for?
Well, I think some of the things we talked about, that you'll see evidence from their behaviors or how they're feeling, so if we're looking at, someone constantly fatigued, are they anxious? Do they seem uh, irritable, quick to react and respond? I think are signs. We might see people burned out, where you can just kind of tell, you see their body language and they roll their eyes as you just talk about a new deadline, or, um, so it's even things like we talked about before, the absenteeism, the tardiness, the increased sick time off. All of those things can be signs and indicators that we have a problem. And then if we're not taking a pulse once in a while, either asking the questions, and sometimes we got to get very specific. We might start out with, how are things going for you, and then we've got to get probe in a little deeper. How's that deadline? Have I given you realistic expectations? Are you clear about the requirements of your job? Do you have the tools and resources you need? Getting more details so that we can kind of help to surface out and identify those things if they're not just showing themselves.
That's a really good point. It really is. Do you have what you need to do what I'm asking? Man, how many times I wish somebody would have asked that. No, that's crazy. I don't. If you want me to do that, you need to do this and this. I used to have supervisors and, ask me, hey, what would it take to do that? And my answer a lot of times was the same: time and money, like the two things that they never want to give you. So, but it was nice to be asked. Sometimes you don't get asked. That's a really good point, Ken. I appreciate that. And it helps to alleviate that stress so much. Workplace, knowing there's a guy at least understands that, there's more to this than just getting a memo or an email. Hey, I need you to do this. Bump. What? Don't you know what else I'm doing?
Exactly.
And you mentioned something before about work balance between work and life when we're talking about hours and things like that. And it's come up before about, your work life and your personal life balance. It's gone so wacky lately because people working from home. The whole COVID thing, man, it just made people either pivot or crumble. Is in some professions, there are people who knew nothing about the technology that we're doing right now. This right now has become so easy, doing a chatting online like this. Before COVID, I called you up, and, came to your office. It was a lot different. So people had to learn a lot about technology. They had to learn about how to do their job with that technology, and then they still had to do their job. And then the people that are working from home either felt like, oh great, I don't have to get dressed to go to work, or oh my god, this sucks, I'm always at work. So I don't know. So how do you have some suggestions how people can find that work-life balance? How do you do it?
Well, first I would I wanted to comment a little bit on the working remote because a lot of us moved to that during COVID, and we discovered, hey, it works. So now all of a sudden, I don't have to pay for an office, and I don't have to pay for so a lot of employers have left it that way, sometimes to the demise of their teams, because we're missing some things now. We don't get that connection that we used to have when I could sit across the table face to face. And I mean, certainly we get some of that through a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, but it's different when I'm there in person, and I can shake your hand and pat you on the back and give you a hug. I mean,
Right.
we're missing connection and some of that interaction that we lost. And so, we certainly encourage work-life balance. Well, the other thing that's happening with those who are remote is, I alluded to this earlier, we don't know when to turn off work, because we come into our office is at home, and so we're constantly looking at our email throughout the day and into the evening. And then we get people used to us doing that. And so then we're all doing it back and forth throughout and so we don't know when to turn off work and when to have that balance and such. So we recommend things like having a designated work spot at at your home where you work, and when you're in there, you're in work. Do work, even dress for it and act it. And when you go out of that office, leave work there. Don't check your emails into the night, and don't we have to schedule balance, work life balance, or it isn't going to happen. So we have to put in boundaries to make sure that we ourselves are doing things. I have to make sure I'm taking breaks. I have
Right.
to, because it's really easy just to keep going, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm not as effective. What's going on? Oh yeah, I guess I ought to go eat. I got to go have some lunch. So just little things like that can go a long way.
And boy, that's so funny that you say that, because that's exactly what happens to me. Not every day. Most days I'm pretty, I have a good balance. I do work for a while, stop for a while, work for a while. But there are days when I'm into something, like our magazine. We have two magazines that are come out, 4 times a year. When the day the magazine comes out, I find myself sitting here. I have 3 screens in front of me with like 6 windows open, and all of a sudden, I don't feel well, and I go, "Oh, I forgot to eat." It's like,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
passing out here. I don't know why.
I just, yeah, all of a sudden, like I'm shaky and like, uh, uh, I've had the conversation with people in the past about this one thing, and they said they set alarms for, to take a break, walk away from the situation. And you're right about the fact that you got to know when to turn it off. It's really hard. We carry around if you work at home, if you work virtually, you carry around your office in your pocket on your phone. You can get an email. One of the things I learned, and if you're doing this, stop it. I used to have a little alarm every time I got an email, went ding. So I'd be in the other room and I'd hear ding, and my heart would just like, oh my God. Finally, my boss, Dr. Kirsch, once said to me, "Will, an email's not a crying baby. It's okay." So they went, oh my God, that was perfect. Thank you, Dan. And so I shut off that alarm, and that alleviated some of the stress. Learning those balances and the things that you said are right on. And working from home has a lot of challenges. People, I have a friend who works for the Better Business Bureau, and during COVID, they all went home. They all started working from home. He does not want to go into work anymore. He says, I get done so much more done at home now. And it's because I'm relaxed and I can do more at home. He has to do investigations, and he's much happier. He hates going in for meetings. He
Well,
says, "Well, you
but
get anything done."
that goes back to something we talked about before. Everybody's different. I hear that a lot. That a lot of people are saying, I'm way more productive because that's the way they're wound. That's their personality. They want to, a lot of the introverts are like, hey, I'm so happy that I get to go
Right.
shut myself away in an office at home. I get so much done now. And so what we're seeing too is a lot of hybrid situations where some of the employers are letting some people come in, some work remote, and then we're almost requiring some of those introverts to still come in once in a while because we want to see their face and shake their hand and have dialogue. But we found that employers that have increased their communication hold a few more meetings, even though we hear the word meeting, we're going, oh boy, a meeting, but hold a productive meeting. So I have one of my team leaders that meets every day with her whole team virtually for about 15 minutes, and they do this quick check-in with each other. They also, we have a we call it our HR service social board, where people go in and we say, put pictures of your kids and tell us those stories, and
Yeah.
we get little chats and things going on there, and it seems really balanced out, and it gives people some of that interaction that they're missing. And we have people in multiple states with HR service, and so it's hard for us all to be together anyway. And
Right.
so doing some of these things helps, and then finding ways to get people together and connected when you can. So we've had times where we fly people in and we'll go do some fun things together, hold a conference and things. Or the people that are together in different areas, we encourage, hey, get together and go do lunch. So you can get some of that balance back to the things that we've lost with the remote work and the connections, which all can relieve stress is some of
Right.
the things that we're missing.
It's a great point. I mean, every company has their own culture. I have always been a big believer of like being a team culture and developing that culture. And when you get people, employees who or members of that culture, they get a feeling of ownership. They get a feeling of, this is my company. This is my job, is not just a job. I think it's more productive to feel that way. You get people who want to be that way, and you're right. They're missing that personal, handshake, hug, pat on the back. And in some businesses, that's a big loss. because that personal connection with people, it means a lot. The technology is a blessing and a curse. For guys my age, I was told I am a digital, how did they put it? I'm a digital immigrant. And the younger guys are digital natives. So they're better with it than I am. Like, and so,
I resemble that remark.
Yeah. Well, hey, when I started college, I was an engineer. We didn't even have calculators. Oh God, I'm old. It's slide rules. So I think it's partly generational, and it's a progression of the workplace, but we cannot dehumanize it with technology because we'll lose something. We'll lose something. All right. So we talked about some really good best practices of what you should do at home. If you're out there listening, this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Ken, because he has a real good global view of what's going on in a lot of corporations with a lot of employees and people's. HR services helps thousands of people. So if you are working remotely, do some of the things he said. Make a schedule, have a bell go off, something. But that work-life balance is what keeps you healthy, keeps you mentally healthy. I also wanted to talk to you about, because I know you know of EAP programs and things that different corporations are doing. Are there some self-care strategies that I'm an employee, I'm feeling stressed out? How does an employee, without having to go to HR or their supervisor, just day in and day out, how is there some things they can do to help manage their workplace stress on an individual level?
Yeah, well, certainly, if we have like an EAP program, they could use that, or yeah. I don't think there's any shame in going to a counselor. Whether it's through a program like that or finding one on your own. I see a counselor. I mean, I think it's very common for
Mm-hmm.
people to have someone that they can go to and talk about the challenges and such in their life. So I highly encourage that. And there is no shame in that at all. But even things like just personal care, physical and mental, if I'm not getting sleep, I'm gonna be more irritable and stressed if I'm not watching my diet, and I'm not getting some regular exercise. And these are all some real basic things, but there's things that we can do. We encourage people to even have some stress relief things like doing some meditation or just some personal time, going for a walk. I mean, there's so many simple things, building in and scheduling in fun and
Mm-hmm.
downtime. And you mentioned the work-life balance. Go do some fun things with your kids and your spouse and your family, and get out there and enjoy life. There's more out there than work. This is coming from someone that, I mean, I want high productivity and I want work, but I know that when my team is balanced out with their home life and work life, they're going to be more effective when they're with us. And, we get way more from somebody than those who are trying to put in those 60-hour work weeks constantly. And that doesn't mean we don't have them. We have the times when there's stressors, but when we have those high volume times, make sure there's some downtime, and make sure we're noticing and recognizing that and rewarding that and letting people know you're appreciated and we don't expect you to do this all the time. So I've got to take control of that culture and steer that ship to where that doesn't become the norm, to let them know here's what the norm is, even when I have peaks. So,
Boy, you hit it right in the head. I mean, first of all, recognize the fact that, okay, we're going through a busy time now, but also recognize the fact that, okay, guys, things are calm now, and it's okay. It's it's all right.
it's expected. Not
it,
only okay, it's expected. Go
right,
take some time off, some downtime, well deserved, and
right.
and balance out your life.
Yeah, and so you know what you do, but you got to admit there are some bosses out there who just like are so a personality and so hopped up, and it may be because their boss is giving them, what we used to say about whale crap when we were NYPD. It flows downhill, So the guy at the bottom gets all of it, but that doesn't mean the guy above you is not getting it either. And that happens all the time. So I think you're right. I was in the academy, and I was talking to an old time cop who came in to train us. I don't even remember what. And I was talking to him, and he looked at me, typical cop fashion. Listen, kid, being a cop is what I do. It's not what I am. And I tell you what, to this day, I remember it. In that I live that for just about every job. This is what I do. It's not necessarily who I am. It's one of the ways that we define ourselves, but it's not the only way.
Well, you bring up an important point that I think a lot of us need to know who we are. What are our values? What do we stand for? And how do we define ourselves and such? Because if we don't spend some time with that personally, then we find ourselves identifying with our job or
Right.
identifying with things that are not as healthy as focusing on some good core values and some things that are important to you and your family.
It's a good point. Ken, we're almost running out of time, but there's one final question I got to ask you. I ask everybody. I want to know what Ken does personally to relieve your stress. What do you do? I know what I do. I get on my motorcycle and I hit the back roads of Florida and, go riding with my club. And yes, I watch birds. I do. But what does Ken
somebody's
do?
got to do it. Yeah. So my wife loves this, but I golf. So I take one day a week that I'm gone for 4.5 hours, and I go out with my buddies and we joke and we play and we have a good time. And so I build in some downtime, I build in some fun, I build in some connection, and then I tried to do that with my wife too. We have a date night, and we make that happen. And so, but it's little things too. If I don't plan out my priorities, then everything's a priority. If I don't organize my workload and my focus, then I'm all over the place. And and that becomes stressful as well. And I've also had to learn to delegate and to say no once in a while,
That's a
and
hard
so
thing.
it is, and I have to have boundaries and define what, and if something's crossing into that boundary of my work-life balance or whatever, I've got to step in and take control of that and take responsibility. But just planning for some of those downtimes, planning for some breaks, planning for that work-life balance to make those things happen. That's what I do.
And that's a great answer. You build in something that's fun, social, physical. Sometimes golf ruins a perfectly nice walk through a beautiful park. But other than that, learning to deal with those frustrations are helpful also. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today. I think a lot of people out there that are having a lot of stress at work can see that there's things you can do. Breathing, meditation, get outside, plan some stuff, be organized. I always found that to be my biggest stress reliever. So, Ken, thanks.
For sure.
Thanks for
Thank
all
you.
the tips. I appreciate you being here. And thank you all for joining us today. This has been your host, Will Heckman. I want to thank you for going to stress.org and thank you for subscribing to this podcast. I also want to remind everybody that just as stress is different for each of us, there's no one stress reduction or management strategy that is right for everyone. So that means you need to join us next time to see what we're talking about when it comes to stress and stress-related issues. And I hope what Ken and I had to say today will help you find your way to contentment. Good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.